Hello, I'm Trish Banks, and today in Art as a Resource for Wellness, we're going to be looking at staying connected. And when I say staying connected, that usually refers to relationships. But I would like you to take a little bit of time to become more connected to yourself. And we tend to have very glib one-word answers when we ask ourselves, well, how am I? And when someone else asks us how we are, we say things like, I'm fine, as though there's just a one-word answer. So I'd invite you to maybe drop a little bit deeper and to ask that question in three parts. And the first part is, how am I in my body? How are you feeling in your body? Do you feel stiff? Do you feel sore? Do you feel energized? So how am I in my body is one answer. And then you also have, how am I in my emotional self? So how am I feeling? And we can often have conflicting feelings. We can feel both happy and sad. And if it's difficult to find a word to name your emotion, all emotions are embodied. So maybe a sensation somewhere in your body can give you a little bit of a clue. And then lastly, we have the question, how am I in my mind? And that refers to, what's the story I'm telling myself about life right now, about myself right now? So getting these answers and putting them all down in a circle to represent who you are, that gives you an idea who it is that's in relationship to another person. And then give them a circle of their own. And then fill that circle in whatever way is appropriate for you, for how you perceive them to be. And there is a distinction there between how you feel they are, or who they are, and how they feel themselves to be, because they would fill that circle in very differently. So when you have the two circles filled in, then you have an opportunity to begin to look at what's the relationship like between the two people. So you can begin to see what that bridge is. You now have a clear understanding of who it is you are, the person who's the perceiver, the person who's doing the relating, and your perception of that other person and who they are. Now, all this sounds very heady experience when you describe it, but when you're actually drawing, when you're filling in that circle, when you're giving yourself the time to really see, what does it feel like to stand in your circle? Who do you think the other person is that's standing in theirs? And how do they actually interact with each other? And sometimes that bridge, that link between the two, can be a surprise. It can be very defined, it can be very clear. Other times it can be very light, very wispy, maybe a little bit unsure. So I think doing this exercise not only gives you a good way to relate to yourself, but it also shows you how you're relating to other people. Now, if you're living in a confined space, sometimes relationships can be under a lot of strain. So this can be a more, I suppose, a lighter way to look at how you're relating to each other. It's something that you can do with children. They obviously can be very literal and very direct, so you may not like necessarily what you'll hear, but nevertheless it's important to hear it and not go into judgment and not go into any kind of explanations or explaining why you are the way you are. This is about accepting. It's about a gentle allowing each person to be who they are, to express who they are in their circle, and to show the links that are there between each of you. Sometimes we forget that we have these lovely connections with our families, with siblings, a spouse, even with friends. And at a time like this where we are suffering from a certain amount of isolation, it's important to do this reaching out and to recognize that your connections may be stronger. They may be benefiting from the boundaries of not physically seeing people. So connections are funny things because we never understand necessarily straight away with our minds what's going to make them better, what's going to make them weakened. So really establishing the idea of drawing these connections, drawing some representation of the other people in your life, and how you relate to them and how much those connections matter to you, it does tend to give us this lovely feeling of being part of a web of humanity. And because it's through those connections that we can express our love, our support, and it's not always about the conflicting issues that arise in the moment. It's about recognizing that we are connected as the humanity, the family of humanity that we are. So have fun with your connections, with staying connected. Remember, you start firstly with yourself, and stay well, and I'll see you again soon.